Well, if you saw the movie Gattaca, that was the scenario. I mean, it's hard to believe that movie was 12 years ago now, but it was a future where basically no decision was made until you checked a person's genetics. Well, you know, it was jobs, it was dating, everything, and it was a pretty oppressive society. And it actually turns out that genes aren't as deterministic as that for most diseases. I mean, they give you a probability, but you may or may not. I mean, you know, your children may or may not ever have heart disease or colorectal cancer. Hopefully, they won't. So these are probabilities. But yeah, this is one of the biggest ethical issues. In fact, I was just at Harvard a couple weeks ago giving a talk there at Harvard Medical School, and a geneticist named George Church, which some of you know, has sequenced the entire genome of 10 people, and they're starting to analyze that data. It's one of the first times this has been done. There have been about 20 individuals that have had every piece of DNA in their body sequenced, and he was telling me that in their preliminary data, what they're finding out is, at least in these 10 people, everyone carries 6 or 7 dread diseases that, given the right combination with somebody they mated with, could create a terrible disease. And this is only 10 people, and there needs to be a lot more research done on this. But I think this is a looming ethical issue. And I'll give you another quick example. In some countries around the world, especially in Asia, even the most crude manipulation, if you will, of genetic information is whether you have a boy or a girl. And there's some cultures that so favor having a boy that there are literally girls, females missing in some countries, and in some cases hundreds of thousands or even millions as you move through a country like China or India. And that's obviously going to cause huge problems as you have more males and females. So this technology is not something to ignore or to, I mean, you have to take it very seriously. It's powerful information. And the good news is that with this testing, it won't be too long till where you could make a determination. And if you and your wife are carriers of something, you could decide, how to proceed with that. And it depends on how you feel about various, IVF procedures and things like that. And in fact, with Tay-Sachs syndrome and some other serious diseases, that's actually being exercised even now. But we are blithely, I like that word, blithely, mating and moving ahead as if this information doesn't exist. And in a way, that's a blissful state because up until now we haven't known. So if you fell in love with somebody, you married them, and you maybe had children. We'll just have to see how that shakes out. I mean, we already do a little bit of determination. I mean, you're attracted to one type of person and not another. And so there's a little bit of genetic breeding, if you will, going on, but it's certainly going to get a lot more interesting, let's put it that way.
I have 2 questions. First is how much is it going to cost for sequencing the whole human genome? And second is that what is the implication of those data being deployed by or exploited by the insurance companies?
And by the way, I don't want to be the only one to talk up here, but so if you guys want to jump in. But let's see, what was the first question, the sequencing?
How much is, yeah.
Oh, how much? Well, that's a good question. The Human Genome Project, which is the first human, actually was a group of humans were put into one genome, was $2.7 billion. And that was just 10 years ago. It's hard to believe. There's now a company out in South San Francisco that I just visited recently, wrote a column about, called Complete Genomics, that's saying they can do it for $5,000. And I think they probably are pretty close to, at least in the low thousands. Some of the more recent ones have been in the tens of thousands. So this technology is moving so fast now, it's hard to really say. But when you start getting down to low thousands, you're getting to a place where you can sequence large numbers of genomes. And what was the second question?
The implication the insurance company will use those data.
Well, last year, Congress passed a law called the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, GINA, and that protects, in most cases, people from, actually it hasn't started yet, it starts in a few months. It protects you from your insurer or from an employer discriminating against you based on genetic information. My center at Berkeley, in fact, is doing a big study on this. It's going to be released this fall in conjunction with some other groups. And we're finding that there are some holes even in the insurer and employer protection, although it's pretty good. but there needs to be a lot more work done. Law enforcement, even when I talk to universities, university students, there's no protection at all. University wanted to use that as a criteria for admission, for instance. And there are many, many areas that are still not covered. And then, as I mentioned in my talk, we haven't even come close to, say, neural discrimination. And there are already legal cases being brought up. My brain made me do it. Or, people who are scanned. I mean, imagine when scans become something you go in before a job interview and they find out, what's going on inside your brain. So there's no protection against that right now. So it's a huge area.
I'd just like to add really quickly. Do you want to base your medical decisions on your parents' history, or do you want to base it on your molecular anatomy, right? This might sound really crude, all kids, close your ears, but for the men out there, if you had the predisposition for testicular cancer or cervical cancer for women, wouldn't you like to know? Right? So think about that and worry about the insurance companies later. Your life and survival, I suppose, and your ability to support your family is more important than some of the details. But push the Senate and Congress to fight for the just laws. And I think the debate is out there, so I think they're doing a decent job in making sure that things are protected.
So I'll follow on that. It's not just a matter of understanding what you're predisposed toward developing or what you and your spouse may be predisposed toward passing along to your children. As we learn more about our genetic predispositions to certain diseases, we also learn more about the best ways to treat those diseases. And as we're taking a look at more effective and cost-effective health care in this country, being able to determine ahead of time the best course of treatment for a particular individual. For example, with Alzheimer's disease, there are several markers that will determine whether or not commercially available treatments will actually work for you or not. Most of them will only work for about 30% of the population. So having that information on hand and having it handy, like you talked about, in something that you can keep in your wallet, is going to be critical for maintaining our long-term health and the long-term health of our children. So there's definitely a cost-benefit analysis there, as well as a personal risk analysis.
I will just add a quick coda to that, which is there is an issue of this information being predictive and actually much of it not being entirely accurate right now, and also the fact that it is a probability. It doesn't mean you'll actually get a disease. So you do have the issues floating around right now. I sometimes tell the story. I met the candidate Obama, and he was drinking from a glass of water, right? It was at a lunch. And I was thinking, boy, it'd be interesting to snag that glass and go back and, sequence this guy. And, I will make a prediction, which I've been doing in these talks, that in the next election, presidential election, or perhaps the one after that, you will actually get someone sequencing these guys. You can't really hide this. It's in my glass right here if anybody, I've already been sequenced, so you don't need to do me. But, with the uncertainty of this information and the scary, label someone would get having, say, a high risk for Alzheimer's, if President Obama, it turns out, has that marker, how will that play politically? And so I think this, as I said, this is potent, powerful information, especially right now, because we're in a transition phase still to where this is still not entirely ready and useful in many cases, but it's out there. So you have to be protected from that. I think we all need to be.
I wanted to know if it was possible for my mother and my father and me to have 3 different blood types.
Do we have any?
I'm actually trying to do the Mendelian cross in my head right now.
I know a mother and a father can, definitely obviously have different.
Well, sure, you could have A, B, and O in the same family. Okay. Absolutely. Yes.
I'm a historian, so I didn't really know the answer to that.